All right, so this is where we're going to be going with today. We're not taking it to this exact level on the chair. We're going to create a very basic chair. But I just wanted to show you where, after we're done with this, kind of how we can go a little bit further. So here is just this thinking. There we go. Everyone's computer is not working. All right, so here's the chair, and you'll see in here there's a lot of detail done to this thing to make it look like an actual chair. I've put in a pad on the chair. I put in these little strings on the back of the chair so that if this was a real chair, you could tie the strings to the back of this and make it look like an actual chair, and the cushion doesn't fall off. There's actual little buttons that are on here. Okay, and all the things that we're doing today, you'll be able to make the chair, and you'll be able to make the strings if you wanted to. It's not part of the assignment, but it's something that you could add to your scene to make it look a bit more realistic. Okay, and then we're also going to be building these books. So we're going to start off with this very, very basic book, the middle one here. And we talked about last time the difference between scaling components and the difference between actually just moving them. So if I start off with this plain book, I can take this and do different things with it. I can make one book essentially and then use that to make other books. So this first book that I created, this guy over here is me just scaling it up. And you can see that the proportions of it don't really work. You can see how this is now like stretched out here, and this is really thin, and it looks kind of funky. This guy is with me moving the components. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean by that. If I duplicate this, and I just scale this up like that, you can see how this area on the side gets really thick, but the back stays thin. But then you could say, okay, we'll just scale it the other way too. Okay, well now I do that, and now it looks like a ridiculously oversized book. That's really short. Okay, now I can go through and duplicate the book and just scale it up. Scale it up arbitrarily, and all the proportions will stay the same. But the second I start to scale it in one direction over another, that's where we get into having some issues. So what I can do is just take this and grab the components. And again, you'll see that selection is really handy to be able to kind of grab the exact components you want, and then I could pull this out. And you can see by pulling it out that I'm not stretching out this side or the other side. And I could actually make this look like a really thick book if I wanted to. I could even make it look like a thinner book if I wanted to. Okay. Now, one of the things that's going to be important as we start moving points around is that we never cross the points. Okay. Have you ever seen Ghostbusters? They never cross their beams. We're never going to cross points. And if we do that, what happens is, watch this. There we go. See, it looks like everything's okay from this side. But on that side, we actually have the surface kind of like doubling back on itself. Once this happens, it's very tricky to be able to unwrap this. Because basically, we just have a clustering of points on top of each other. And to fix it, we have to go through point by point and just kind of reorganize it. So it's always best not to do that right off the get-go. Okay? So a lot of times what I'll do when I'm doing something like a book is I'll actually model one book and then use that as my template to create 100 books if I needed to. I never want to, for our first assignment we're going to do it, but for a regular one, if you ever look at a bookcase, and this is a good example here, you look at the books, the ones that are the same kind of book are all the same size, but the ones that are different, obviously they're going to be a different thickness, a different height, a different depth. Okay, so in order to get, and again, another level of realism in our scene, we always want to keep these things in mind. A lot of people say, okay, well, I have one book and I want a whole bookshelf, so I'll just go duplicate, scoot it over, and then there we go. Okay, and that just, it looks okay if this was an encyclopedia, but I'm sure none of you even know what an encyclopedia is because everything's online now. But it was a collection of books. It was like 26 books you would get in the mail. No, you know what it is. Okay, this down here is an encyclopedia set. If you wanted to look up aardvarks, you would go into the A and you would look up aardvarks. They don't sell those anymore, I don't think. All right, so what we want to do is we want to just begin by creating some of these things. A lot of the stuff we did last time is just redone over and over and over again to create these things. All right, so enough of that. All right, so now we're inside Maya. We have to go and set our project. If you have set it and you've opened it, fine. If not, just follow along. We're going to File, Set Project, and we click on the project folder that we're working on. We're working on the desk, so we click on the desk. Now, one cool thing about saving our preferences and always going back to it is typically it'll take us right into our folder and it'll list all of our projects. If our preferences aren't there, then we have to go into our folder and do it anyway. Okay, so I'm setting it to Sarcona Desk. I don't go any further. Oops. Sarcona Desk, I hit Set, and then I can open up my latest file. Okay, so this is where we left off on, is the desk. Now we should be done with modeling the desk. We're not going to go any further on the desk. We might grab points and move the points around in order to get it the right proportions, but we're not going to be editing any of this history stuff that we have here. Okay? If you look at my list of history items, the first thing we did was create a cube. And then we modified the cube. We extruded it 6 times. We tweaked it some more. And then we added a bevel. Okay? That's kind of like exactly how we modeled this thing. When you see a character, they're doing the same thing and they have a huge list of things. And if they never delete their history, you can go all the way down to the bottom to the 5,000th item that says polycube or whatever they started with. All right, so we're going to delete the history. So in our shelf, if we go to our custom shelf, and my custom shelf is not here because I didn't copy my preferences. There we go. We have one called History, which is deleting history. If you don't have it there, we can just go to Edit, Delete by Type, and History, and delete the history that way. Okay? Edit, Delete by Type, History, and that deletes our history. So now we don't have all those options over there. It's important if you go between versions, like if you're in Maya 2015 and you want to go to 2014, that you delete the history on your objects, because that gets rid of anything that might be version specific. Okay? So now this is basically raw data of a polygon and what a polygon is. All right, another thing we're going to do is if we look over here in the channel box, you'll see how it says translate X 0, translate Y 5.581 on mine. Yours is going to say something different. Okay? A bunch of different numbers in there. We don't want any of those things. I like to have everything nice and clean. So we're going to go under Modify and say Freeze Transformation.
Highlight them first, huh?
Yeah, make sure the desk is selected.
You go where?
Modify Freeze Transformation. Okay, and what that's going to do is it resets all of our things to 0s and 1s. Okay, my translates and rotates get put back to 0. My scales go back to 1. The default for scaling is 1. It's not 0. 0 for scaling does that. It scales everything to 0. All right, so now that's cool. I also want to take this and put it on a layer. Some people will model one object in a new scene, keep it in that new scene, and then just import it into the new scene every time they model something new. For this assignment, we're going to keep everything right inside of the same scene file. So we're just going to make a new layer and hide that item. Okay? So we grab the desk. On the far right layer icon on the layers palette, we're going to click, and we're going to relabel that to be the desk layer. So desk underscore layer. And then we save, and then we hide by clicking the V. Okay? So now we should have nothing in our scene because we've hidden it on a layer. And if we want to get it back, we just click the V again, and then it'll come back. All right.
I made mine.
Only the Ron. All right. So what that means is that if we go over here, we made a new layer. You don't have to do this part. And I do stuff like starting it with a number, and then I try to save it, it'll give me an error saying you can't save it with a digit at the front of it. Okay? Or like in Sam's case, she just had a space at the end of hers, and it didn't like that space at the end of hers. All right? So you just have to be aware that there are some things that Maya likes to be named a certain way. The best thing to do when you name anything in Maya, never use spaces, never use special characters like a hashtag or a question mark or anything like that. Just use regular lettering and numbering. Numbers are always at the end. So if this is a layer I want to name, I would say my new layer _001. Okay? I also do what's called camel casing. The first word is always lowercase, and then every word after that, the first letter is uppercase. Okay? You may have seen that on websites. A lot of websites use it. A lot of programs use it. But it's easier to read once you get used to having it like this instead of it having all blended together. Instead of it being like this, my new, like that, it's hard to read. Obviously, all uppercase is hard to read because you're yelling. And then there we go. Okay? So it's easiest to read this kind of thing. It also looks more professional to start using that camel casing. All right? So typically when I name stuff, I'm going to be using that. And I can just delete this layer. There we go. Okay. So now off to the chair. So we're going to start off with an object to create the chair. Before we do that, all right, so let's create a cube. And remember, we're using polygons for everything. We're estimating all of our sizes, so we don't have to be 100% accurate. We're looking at mainly proportions anytime we model anything. Okay, so I made a cube and I just kind of flattened it out a little bit. But you just estimate, okay? You just kind of punch it in and try it out. So I'm going to do 3 in the width, 3 in the depth, and there we go. Okay, once we have those, then we're going to right-click and hold, and then go to Edge Mode. And just like we did on the desk, we're going to double-click the edge, shift double-click the other edge that's parallel to it, and then scale it out. And this is where we're defining how thick those legs are going to be. If the legs are going to be, you know, big blocky ones, then we would pull these in further. If they're going to be narrower ones, then we pull them out more. Okay? So I'm going to go to about there, this thickness here. Again, it's your chair. You can kind of go with, you know, just something that looks good. Now we're also using scale as opposed to move. And the reason we use that is that if I move this one over so far, and then I double click this one and move that one over so far, I don't get the exact distances. It's a little thing, but it can make a big difference when we're modeling stuff. So we always want to use that scale to just scale them apart. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing the other way. Grab those edges and scale it out. Okay, so we selected the edges in order to pull it out. Now we have to grab the faces in order to do the extrusions for it. And we also have to pay attention to where, again, our up is. Okay? If we look at this little manipulator down in the bottom left, the Y should be on the top of that little manipulator. Okay? If you're upside down like this, the Y is facing down. That means you're upside down. So we're going to go to Faces. So we right-click and hold, go to Faces. And we're going to click on the 4 corners on the bottom. Okay, so we go to Edit Mesh, way down here at the bottom where it says Extrude, and we go to that Extrude. The Extrude tool we talked about before, where basically we click on it and drag it, is nice, but it doesn't have all the features. I like the features of this one. We can do a lot more with it. So we're just going to drag the blue arrow downward. And again, this is just an estimate as to, you know, how long are these legs on this chair. I'm going to say about there for mine. I can adjust those later. Okay, we can always grab the points and move them around if we need. Okay, so we've extruded that. Now what we also want to do is add a tiny little taper to each one of the legs, just so they're not blocky. I talked about that last time with the table. So what we can do is down here where it says offset, I'm just going to click on the 0 and just type in a number. I don't know what the number is going to be. I'm going to try at first 0.01. And I'm going to look at it and see what does it look like at 0.01. Okay, not very much, so I'm going to go to 0.1, and that's too much. So then I just go somewhere in the middle, 0.05. 0.025 for me looks like a good value. Okay, I want a tiny taper. I don't want it to look like I'm going on like stiletto legs. Okay, so now we're going to take and create the back of the chair. It doesn't matter which two you grab, as long as they're next to each other and not across from each other. But now we're going to grab the two faces at the top of the chair, at the corners. Okay, and we're going to extrude these again. So we go to Edit Mesh, and we go to Extrude way down at the bottom. And then we pull this up to about how high we think the back of the chair should be. So we just go over here and we type in 8, and then we double check just to make sure that our math is correct, and say opening, slat, opening, slat, opening, slat, opening, slat. Perfect. Okay? So you see how we're kind of breaking the surface down before we even get into it. All right, so now that we have that, we have to go and kind of move some of these around because right now it's just too boring. Everything's perfectly laid out. So we're going to right click and go to vertex.
Can you go back to that division one on the back?
Right here, we just punch that to 8.
On the face. Okay.
You got it? All right, now just for fun, before we move on to that next stage, sometimes it will happen that we'll deselect, and now we need to get back to that tool. How do we get back to that tool to add 8 divisions? Okay. That tool, let me make sure all my stuff is showing here, because right now it's all hidden. Show all. It is right over here, this Show Manipulator one on the far left. It says Last Tool Used, Show Manipulator. Now it's still not showing. The Show Manipulator will show the manipulator for the tool I have selected. Over in the channel box, there's a Poly Extrude 2, Poly Extrude 1, a Tweak, and a Polycube. If I click on Poly Extrude Phase 2, that tool pops back in. Okay? So basically I'm telling it I want to see this manipulator for that specific one. Okay? So if something happened like I forgot to put the divisions in, I need to go back to that tool. That's the way I can do it. I could also scroll down inside the channel box, and here's where that 8 divisions is at. Right there it just says divisions 8. I could also just type it in there. Okay? And if I need to, here's that local translate Z. That's how far up I moved it. All right. So even though we're just kind of arbitrarily moving these, Maya's actually recording how far we are moving it so we can adjust these things. All right. So we're in vertex mode. What we're going to do is go to wireframe. So hit your wireframe hotkey. And we're going to start at the bottom by marqueing 2 of these, 2 rows of these at a time. And all we're doing is just sandwiching them together. We're just scaling them down in the Y direction like that. And this is going to be our bar thickness. How thick is that bar going across? Okay, so my bar is going to be like that. And then I'm going to grab the next 2 and do the same thing. And this we are going to have to estimate, how big that is. And then on the last one, I'm going to switch to the Move tool and just pull it up, just to give the top one a little bit more thickness. All right, so now we're going to use the Bridge tool. And the Bridge tool works on faces, okay, just like the Extrude. So we have to right-click and go back to Faces. And what we're going to do is we click on one face. We rotate around, shift click on the opposite face, So you can see the two faces I have selected. And then we're going to go to Edit Mesh, Bridge Option Box. Okay, make sure we go to the option box for this one because we have to set something inside here before we go further. Edit Mesh, Bridge Option Box. Okay, under the face one, there's also an edge bridge. We want to go to the face bridge. Okay, now there's several different ways that we can do a bridge. One of them is linear path. Linear, for all purposes inside Maya, just means no smoothing out. So it's straight. Okay, so if I literally wanted to go from this face to this face straight across, that's what I would do. If I wanted to smooth it out, I could use smooth path. If I wanted to do a smooth path plus a curve, I would do that. So don't click anything on yours. I'm going to show you each one on mine so you can see the difference. So linear, and I'll take the divisions down, or I'll leave the divisions at 5, the default. And I hit apply, and you see it just goes straight across. There's no interpolation there. It's just boom, straight across. If I change this to smooth, you'll see that smooth is also going straight across. Okay? Now the reason that smooth and linear both go straight across is because that's the smoothest it's going to get. Okay? If we swap this, and let me just step away from this for a second. Actually, I'll use this exact thing. I'll just go from here to here. Okay, and if I use linear here, you can see it goes straight. If I use smooth, now it's going to smooth that transition in there. If I look at that shape and I say, oh man, that's really blocky, that's where those divisions come in. So adding more divisions really smooths that shape out, but obviously a lot more divisions in there. And then this other one, smooth path plus curve, does that. Okay. Now why? Why to do that? If I go to wireframe, the curve option actually puts a curve. It puts just like a path inside of that so that I can go and edit those points. Let me scoot this out of the way. I can edit these points and reshape how I want this to look. So if I had a specific design in mind, like I'm doing the Riddler's chair and I want to make sure this looks like a Q or something, or a question mark, I can do that by using this thing. And then I can just go to my divisions and add more divisions to help smooth out that transition. Okay? So for this part of it, we're only going to be using the smooth. There we go. So we're going to be using the smooth path, but at some point we will be using the smooth path plus curve, just so you know. Okay? We don't want 5 divisions. I think 2 divisions is probably going to be good. Yeah, that'll probably be good enough. Okay? So smooth path, 2 divisions, and bridge.
What's the bridge option box?
Edit mesh, bridge option box. Okay, way in the bottom.
I don't have the edit mesh.
Switch up here on the top. Remember that we have several different menu items inside Maya, so if you go up to the top here, you can switch to polygons, and then you'll have it. Or we can hold down the space bar and access anything. You'll see a lot more confusing in there. Okay. The reason that we have the 2 divisions here is because I don't want this to go straight back. I want to have a little bit of a bowing to it so that as you sit in the chair, your back can, nice and coved. All right, we'll adjust that later though. So now we're going to switch back to face mode and grab the next bar area. And now we don't have to go to we don't even have to go to the bridge tool menu anymore. Because we just did bridge, we can just hit the G key. And G will repeat whatever the last tool was that we used. So switch to faces, hit G after you select them. Switch to faces, oops, select the 2 faces, and then hit G. All right, so now that we have that, what we can do is start to manipulate some of these divisions. So we're going to right-click on it and go to Vertex. At this point, the kind of stuff we're doing, we could grab edges, we could grab faces. Vertex is the easiest thing to select, so that's why we're switching to Vertex. Then we're just marqueing from the frontish view those 4 vertices there to select those, and then just giving it a nudge backwards. So just go to the Move tool and just nudge it backwards a bit. Then I'll go to the next row and do the same thing.
Can't we select them all at the same time?
No, because I'm doing them not all at the same distance.
Oh.
So the top one I'm moving more, and the bottom ones I'm moving less. That way they have lumbar support. There we go. If we were moving them all... Okay, now what I want to do is the chair is super uncomfortable. It's the flattest chair in the world, so we don't want that. We should have a little dip in the chair that our butt fits nicely into, okay? Now, we don't have any divisions. There's 0 divisions right in the center of this in order to create that little dimple inside there. There's multiple ways to do this. I'm going to show you a couple, and then we'll pick one from there, okay? A lot of times when you're working, you just try stuff out. You see what works, you see what's going to look good, and then you go with whichever one works best, okay? So the first one I'm going to do is I'm just going to extrude it. So I'm just going to extrude, and I'm just pulling this down. And you can see that that gives me a little bit of a dip inside the chair. If I spin around, you can see it a little bit better. But what happens is right here, there's no dip in the front of the chair. If you ever had sciatic pain, that's a horrible thing. Okay, you should have some nice, easy options for your legs to go right off here and not get like stuck on there. So that's a no-go. All right, so I'm gonna undo all of that. Whenever I undo and extrude, I watch over here. I know I did 1 extrusion for the legs. I did another extrusion for the back of the chair, so I should have 2 extrusions. Number 3 is up there, so I need to keep hitting undo until that one goes away. Okay, that way I'm ensured that that surface is gone. So now the other way is the way we're going to do this. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add a division straight down the middle here. We're going to add a division straight down the middle there, and then we can go ahead and tweak those things. And we'll actually add 3 divisions going this way. And we'll add 3 divisions going that way too. Okay, so we're going to go to the Mesh Tools, and we're going to go to Insert Edge Loop Tool option box. Okay, Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool option box. And what this tool allows us to do is exactly that: insert edges, insert points, so that we can manipulate it. So I want to go in here and say I want multiple edge loops. So I'm clicking the multiple edge loop box, and I want 3 edge loops. Okay, so I want 3 lines going that way, and I want 3 lines going the other way. Now all I have to do is just click. You can see this line going straight across here. I just click on that line, and I'll get 3 edges jumped in there. Then I spin around to this side and click, and I'll get 3 edges going that way. So now that we have that, we can exit the tool just by switching to the Move tool or any other tool. And I want to grab these middle parts here. So I'm going to right click and go to Vertex and click off. So I don't have anything selected, and I want to click on this center one. Okay? Now what I want to do is push that center one down, but not like this, because this is going to be a mess, just like doing that. And then the rest of them you'll see don't do anything. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on a tool called Soft Select. Basically it moves whatever point I have selected, it moves the most, and then the next points it moves less, and then the next points it moves even less. So if I wanted a nice smooth transition like we do, it would allow us to do that. So if you hit B, you'll see that your chair turns a bunch of colors. Okay? This is Soft Select, and the yellowish, the brightest yellowish colors in the middle, that's what's going to move the most. The darkest reddish ones are going to move the least. So don't move yours, but watch what happens when I move mine. As you can see, my chair looks kind of cartoony. And you could actually model a chair and then do something like that to give it that cartoony look. You know, I could go like that to it and make it like a Dr. Seuss chair or something. Okay? So what we want to do is, it has a circle around it. Okay, so imagine a circle. The farthest stuff out is no movement, and then the furthest stuff towards the center is the most movement. We want to shrink that circle. All right. So what we do is we hold down the B key, and we middle mouse button drag. Okay? And we're going to middle mouse button drag out to the right, and you'll see your stuff kind of twinkle. And I want to make sure that I just have that center area in there. I don't want any points outside of that center area selected. So if you look at mine, you'll see that. At some point, everything's going to turn that yellowy reddish color, and you might freak out. So that's why I'm kind of introducing this now so that you don't freak out. So we nudge this down a little bit, and if we just click on the next point, you'll see that that selection gradation still is in effect. So then we can kind of pull that down a little bit, go to the next one, pull that down a little bit, and we're just creating a nice little transition for the chair. Okay, and once I go to the end of it, I'm going to start scooting out to the edges and grabbing both sides of it and starting to scoot that down too. Just so there's a nice little dip inside the chair. Alright, so get yours until it looks somewhat like that. Alright, so the chair is, the major part of the modeling is done. If we wanted to tweak any of these things, we can still tweak them, but I think for right now we're good. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the desk layer back on, and then we're going to resize our chair to fit our desk. Okay, so I'm going to raise it up to the legs are on the ground, and I'm going to scoot it over and rotate it. In my case, 90 degrees. However much you have to do yours, then just do that. And then I'm just resizing it to get it about the size that it should be. Make sure that legs could tuck under the desk, obviously. All right, once we're in position, we want to do the same thing that we did for our desk. Okay, we want to put a nice little bevel on it, just so that we have little rounded corners instead of these hard ones. Just as a comparison, if you look at the desk has that bevel, the nice little rounding here. The chair does not. The desk already, without anything fancy, looks much more realistic than the chair does. Okay? So the first thing we do before we move on to adding that bevel is we duplicate the chair. So we just click on it, hit Control D, and then we right click on our original models layer and add that to the selected one. Okay? That way we've duplicated our chair and put it onto that layer. Okay? So now we can grab the chair and we can add the bevel to anything that has a 90-degree angle to it. So
What did you do with the chair? I'm sorry.
You just duplicate it, Control D,
I did.
and then you right click on your original models and you add it to that layer. And it's just going to hide that extra one, but we'll have a copy of the chair we can always refer back to. Okay. So we want to grab anything in this chair that has a 90-degree angle and add a bevel to it. So we're going to go up to Select and select using constraints. And then inside here, we're going to right-click and go to Edge. And that will activate our polygon selections in here.
I'm sorry, could you go back to where that was at?
Yeah.
Under Select, select using constraints. Also, if you hover over your model and it's now turning that orangey, pinky, yellowy color, just tap B again to get rid of that. Okay? Typically, you don't want it on unless you're doing something specific. So under the geometry inside this box that popped up, under Angle, we're going to activate and turn this on. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so we activated the angle. We set 80 to 120. We're going to hit Current and Next at the top. And then when we marquee this, we'll only select angles that are greater than 90 or than 80 and less than 120, which should be all the angles that we need.
Wait, what?
Like on this one, we have all these points selected, but let's say we wanted these too. We could still grab extra points after the fact. We don't have to like, this is it, okay? I really use this tool a lot if I want random faces. Sometimes you just want like a bunch of random cubes extruded up. So you can just turn random on. That's one of the options inside here, right there. And it'll randomly grab faces that we can just extrude up and give us kind of like an organic looking thing. All right, so we're going to hit close and reset. And then under Edit Mesh, we're going to go down to the edge area and do a bevel on it. Okay, and then we'll just edit the bevel settings inside our channel box. We click on Poly Bevel. We change our fraction. And I think the segments we'll put up to 2 maybe. I just want to check the corners. No, we'll leave it at 1.
How'd you get the numbers on your screen?
You click on the Poly Bevel right there. Well, yours will be down further. But in 3D, it just makes it look more realistic. So in this case, we don't want to go with something that's too big like that. That would be something that's more of a routed type thing. We want something that's small like this, where it looks like they just kind of hit the edges with a piece of sandpaper or something. Okay, that's what we're going for in this case. All right, so there's our chair. Wonderful. And if you look at my desk, I can see that my desk is kind of floating and my chair is not floating. So I'm just going to really quickly just adjust these. And it helps to look at that in the front view or the side view and look at that black line and just get it right where it should be, right about there. All right. There's always room to tweak these things. It's just going to bother me. Okay, so you can move your chair around later. It doesn't matter. We're going to take this now and do the same stuff we did to the desk. So we want to take our chair and we want to rename it. So let's rename the chair chair. So we just rename it right here in the channel box to chair. You do have to be in object mode. So if you're still in face mode or edge mode or vertex mode, you can just right click and go to object mode, select it, and then rename it to be chair. And then we're going to go to modify freeze transform, resets all of our stuff. And then we'll go to edit, delete by type history, and that'll delete our history. Okay, I'll do those 3 again because we're going to do those a lot. Okay, right there. So first thing, renaming it chair. Everything should be labeled as we work. Okay, and typically when we're done working, that's when we relabel it. So relabeled it to chair. I go to modify and freeze the transformations. That resets all these. And I go to edit, delete by type, history. Okay, so now he's back to being on no history on here, nothing there. Now I'm also going to create a new layer over here and call that chair layer. And then verify that he's on it just by turning them off. All right, now a couple people, when we're staging our scene, we might want the chair to be at an angle, so it's not so boring and just like here's a chair stuck in the desk. But we never model that way, okay? That's kind of like the last stage of things, is to put these things in that staged position. We may want the chair like this. We may want, this is a frat house. We want the chair like that. Okay, or however we want the chair to be laid out. There might be several chairs. Whatever the case is, okay? But we do that last, okay? And the reason we do that last is because let's say we want to make a change to the chair, and I want to take, I want to take those middle bars and I just want to adjust where their position is. So I don't really have like a clean angle, let's say from the front view, where I can see that chair good enough. This chair's kind of in the way and that one's over there. It's not really like a good angle to see this stuff at. So I want to be able to reset these. Go back to here where it's nice and square, nice and even with my camera. Do all my changes, and then I can put it back to where it was. Okay? And that's true for every scene that we're going to do. If I wanted this to be taller, I can just take this and make it taller. If I want that to be longer, I can just grab this here and make it longer. If this is on an angle, and I go to make it longer, and I grab these points, look at the way the arrow's facing. It's not going to be straight. okay? And I have to eyeball that. So it's much, much easier just to keep it like this and then do that to it and then put it back in position, okay? So one of our last stages in this type of scene is going to be to stage our stuff up, okay? And then as we go, we'll be staging things along the way. But for now, we'll just leave it just like that, okay? So now we have these two layers we could turn off, and they go away. So turn your layers off. Now we're going to work on the book. And call it Chair 002. Thank you for the reminder. All right, so this is the next part, which is our book. And looking at this, we have to, again, break down the shape of it. You know, how do we model a book? Just like before, we're going to start with a cube, okay? And our goal in this one is to break it down into the different steps that we would use to create this. Is going to be a little bit awkward because, you know, it's not just like a chair where we can just extrude the legs, extrude the back, and then just bridge stuff together, okay? So our first goal is to get that shape that's on the whiteboard, okay? So we're going to start with a cube again. Well, that's fine. We'll get her caught up. So we're going to start with a cube and get the proportions right for the book. So imagine that the book is a block. We're just going to get those proportions right for that block. Okay? And then again, going into the cube options and setting up what these are going to look like. So we said in the one we'll have 4, and then the other direction we'll have 3. Oh, that's a good guess. Okay. Now, if for some reason yours didn't turn out like mine, which is possible that, you know, your divisions over here are different than mine. Mine was 4 in the width, 1 in the height, and 3 in the depth. Yours could have been something random. Your goal in anything you model is just to try to wrap your brain around, okay, I'm going the long way of the book. This way of the book needs to have 4. I don't care which one of those I'm editing. That way needs to have 4. So even if it's a matter of taking all these back to 1, and then going with this one and saying 4 here, that didn't do it. 4 here, that didn't do it. 4 there, there we go. Okay, and then turning it around this way and saying I need 3 going this way, and doing that same thing. That's the way to do it. Okay, so regardless of what mine say, you do yours that way. And then, you know, if there's other things that are, you know, you modeled it upside down or you modeled it laying down like this, whatever, you can always adjust those things. We could always, even the size of this, like I've shown before, we can grab these things and adjust the size at any point. So don't be like afraid that you can't move on because you don't have it the exact proportion. All right, so now we're going to jump to the top view. And it's very important we do this in the top view because we have to make sure we grab everything correctly. So we're going to switch to the top view, however you want to get there. So now from the top view, we need to create what this would look like from the top view, okay? But we're going to ignore the pages at this moment, okay? We're not going to do the little dip. We're going to put where the pages would be, but we're not going to do the dip for the pages yet. So we're going to right-click and go to Vertex. And we can do this in any order. What I want to do is, if you look at the drawing on the whiteboard, all of our divisions are on the far right. So all of these things, 1, 2, 3 divisions, are all the way on the right side in this case. So what I want to do is grab these 3 in the middle. I'm going to hit R to scale, and I want to shrink these together. So I'm just scaling it in that one direction, and then moving them over to the side. If yours is rotated vertically and not horizontally, big deal. You just put those 3 divisions on one side, okay? And you're going to be scaling different things. All right, so let me just redo that again so you can see it again. So I grabbed the 3 middle ones by grabbing the vertices. So I right-clicked and went to Vertex. grab the 3 middle ones, scale them together, and then move them over to the side. And again, you can see using these hotkeys, it wasn't just because I'm a sadist and I like to give you hotkey tests. These are useful. Okay, you can constantly see how I'm switching between the move tool and the scale tool to get this thing lined up. Going all the way over here, jumping all the way back. It's a waste of time.
And how do I get it in blue?
You have to right click and go to vertex. Okay, so now that we have these in those positions, then we're going to grab the middle 2 rows and scale those upwards. This is creating the area where the pages is going to be separated from the covers. For instance, I don't grab this, even though it would look right if I grab this, or these 3 that we did before, and I just start scaling them, you'll see that they're scaling outward. That's a bad thing. We don't want that. Okay? Or if I go to the move tool and I move this, you'll see how it's then taking that away from being perfectly straight. I always click right on that arrow because I want to slide it in that same direction. It creates a nice even book. If I'm creating something weathered, I'll do that after. Okay, so now that we have our points in the right spot, now it just becomes a matter of getting the book to look the way we want it to look. So again, watch mine first before you do it. I'm going to grab these corners here, and I'm just going to scale them in this way so they're closer together, and then move them like that. And you'll see that that creates the little rounded edge. And then these guys, I just grab this, and I scale these inward together. Okay, so now create that little shape on yours. All right, if yours isn't looking as tight as mine, your points may be too far spaced apart. So if I have this here and I have this one here, you can see that it really doesn't look like a book now because they're just too far apart. So again, at any point, I can just grab these things and move them or scale them or whatever just to kind of emphasize that book shape. Okay, the ones I saw looked good, so you don't need to worry about that. All right, so now we need to create the pages. And I can't, if I switch to my perspective view, you can stay in top view. If I switch to perspective view and I grab this point and I want to take this and make it into pages, you'll see these are stuck together. Okay? What I need to do is I need to have another division here that is my book binding and then my pages and then the transition between them. The way we get it is extruding. Okay? So back in the top view, we're going to switch to face mode, and we're going to marquee from off of the pages straight into the pages all the way until that one. Okay? Not this one because that's still book binding, but these other ones here we want to marquee. And we marquee them, we don't select them because we have to grab all the stuff that's behind it too. Okay? So we switch to face mode, marquee all the way to that one. Okay. Once we have those faces selected, we're going to switch back to perspective. Don't deselect your faces, keep them selected. If you accidentally deselect them, just hit undo and it'll reselect it. Okay? And I want you to zoom in on a corner of this like I am. Okay? Because we have to see how deep this book binding and the pages are going to go. So edit mesh, all the way down to the face extrude again. And then it has the thickness parameter over here. You might have to rotate so you can see it. We want to take that thickness and put it to something really low. Just so you see, if I put it to 0.1, 0.1 is going to, one thing, it goes outside. We want it to go in. And it's actually a bit too much. So I'm going to make this negative 0.02. All right. I need a little bit more, negative 0.04. All right, I think I like the way negative 0.04 looks. I'm going to go to 0.06 just to see. Nope, I like 0.06 better. Okay. Again, find your number. Find your sleep number. We're done with the book. We just have to go to object mode and click off of it, and then we can click back on it. Okay. So now we're at that same stage that we were with the chair and the same stage we were at with the desk. where this is our base model. Now what we want to do is we want to duplicate it and throw it on the original models layer. So again, we duplicate, Control D. We right click on original models and add it to that layer. And now it's on that layer. Once you're done with that, you can put it on a new layer. So we have a book layer. And then we're going to freeze the transforms. We're not going to delete the history yet because we still have to put our bevel on it, but we can still freeze the transforms. Okay. Now for this one, the 90 degree is not going to work. Okay, and I'll show you why it's not going to work. So I'm going to do this on mine. I'm going to do the 90 degree thing. Current, geometry, angle, active. Good. Close and reset. Okay, so you'll see that this little piece right here did not get selected. All right, not a big deal you might think, but then when we go to the bevel, right there, you'll see that we get this weird little pinching right here, where it takes these two divisions, goes into one division right there. Again, who cares? But then if we were to smooth this out, which we're going to do, it looks really weird. Okay. So for this, it's not going to work to do the select 90 degree angle rotation thing. So we're going to do it manually. And there's not that many divisions, so we'll be fine. So we right click and go to Edge. And what we need to do is select pretty much everything. Hold on a second. Let me see. You know what? Let's do it to everything on the book because there's not that many divisions on it. So let's just go back to object mode. Okay, so go back until it's green, and then just go to Edit Mesh and go to Bevel. Okay, and we're going to put in for the bevel, we're going to put in 2 segments. And that'll give us a nice little sharp rounding here. Again, if this was a piece of wood, they break the corners off. If this is a book, typically it's leather bound, so it doesn't have that sharp edge. It has more of a soft, rounded edge. So we go with an extra division in there just to give that softness in it. Okay? And so now we can click off and we'll see that that book has a nice little edge to it. If your offset needs more work, then you can go to your bevel and change that fraction number to make it more or less. It's obviously too much. 0.5 look good on mine. Okay. Now if we realize too, like just looking at mine, it looks really blocky in this area. Okay, it looks very sharp there, it doesn't look nice and soft. If we needed to, even after we put in a bevel, we can go to the edges here, and I can shift double click them and then hit Control and delete. And it'll delete that edge, leaving a nice smooth edge. Okay, we're not going to do that. We'll just leave it the way it is for now. I think that's fine the way it is. Okay, it actually gives a little bit more pronunciation to it. It looks like the book's been opened a little bit more, and we actually have like a crease in there now. So that's fine. All right, so now our book is good. Let's open up our chair and our desk, and then resize our book to fit inside where the books should be going. Okay, and again, I scale it from the middle. I'm not grabbing just the red or just the blue or just the green. I'm grabbing that middle one and fitting it inside there. So after we have the book kind of positioned, like that-ish over here, then we can do our freeze transform again. That way it's back into position. And then do our delete history under edit. And then make sure we rename it to book. Okay. Now we could go through the process also of staging this thing and adding 100 books in here, such as duplicating and putting a book here, duplicating and putting another book here, laying down. this one's going to be like that, and there'll be another book next to it. Okay, like that. And you could spend probably about another good hour or two kind of setting up your books like this, but don't spend too much time doing that. If you want to throw some extra books on there just to add some more detail to it, that's fine. Eventually, we're going to have to color the books. And what that means is we have to, just like we did Pac-Man, where we grabbed objects and we said, this is this material, we're going to do that to the book, but the books are going to be two different materials, one for the paper and one for the covering, okay? So what we want to do is reserve our texturing of that until later on, once we have everything modeled. So for now, you can just keep one book there. But keep in mind that eventually you will have more books, and we're going to stage some stuff inside of our desk, okay? So for now, you don't need to have the extra books, but if you want to keep them, you're free to do so, okay? So that's the book, that's the chair, that's the desk. From this point on, you're going to be using these other lectures to follow along with, to continue working on this, okay?